All right. Well, welcome back, Merc Nation, to the Merc Method. I am so happy that you're here listening today. If you are new, welcome in. Welcome to Merc Nation. So, today we're going to talk about something that all of us experience, whether we realize it or not. And I am talking about triggers. Now, before you turn off this episode and, think this is something that we're just going to have a conversation about, blaming all the problems on your triggers, just stay with me for a second, okay? That's not what I'm actually talking about today, because I think one of the biggest misunderstandings about triggers is that people assume that they only happen to people who have actually experienced major trauma. While trauma can absolutely create triggers, the truth is we have emotional buttons, right? Words, situations, even sounds and smells that can really change how we feel. Maybe it's a song that reminds you of someone you've lost. For me, I had a few songs that were playing when certain people passed away in my life that might not have necessarily been linked to them. But for me, especially one where uh, when my grandmother passed away, when I got in the car and once I learned that she passed, I got in my car to go to the hospital to say my last goodbyes because she was just basically plugged in until we got there. Um, the song Incubus Wish You Were Here was on. And every single time that I hear that, and it's a great song for that scenario. Every time I hear that song, I think of her. And most of the time I get emotional and cry wherever I'm at. Also, maybe it's being ignored around a conversation because it reminds you of a time when you felt invisible. Maybe somebody didn't answer you. Maybe they didn't answer you in the way that you wanted them to. Maybe it's criticism that instantly made you feel like you're not good enough. We've had a lot of those. I've had so many of those because I tend to overthink a lot of things, like a lot of people that do. Maybe it's watching everyone else's life move forward while you feel stuck. I've felt that way for the last so many months. Interesting thing about triggers is that they don't always announce themselves, right? They don't walk into the room and say, "Hey, I'm your unresolved pain." They come out of nowhere, kind of like grief. Instead, they disguise themselves as anger. Maybe they disguise themselves as anxiety or shutting down or overreacting. How many times have you felt something possibly triggering or not even know it, but be angry out of nowhere, right? Something that's unresolved that triggered you and you didn't even know it. Sometimes they disguise themselves as wanting to quit. And because we don't recognize them, we often end up fighting the symptom instead of understanding the source. Today, I want us to have an honest conversation about what triggers are, how to recognize them, what they might be trying to tell us, and most importantly, how to work through them one day at a time. So, when my cousin who drowned when I was 14 years old, I hated water for the longest time. Water was my biggest trigger. I couldn't stand it. And it took me a very long time to understand that. Like I knew it, but I didn't know how to get through it. And trying to figure out what our triggers are and recognizing them isn't because we're trying to be perfect or trying to never feel emotion again, but because healing isn't about avoiding life. It's about learning how to navigate life without letting every trigger control the direction we're heading. It's exhausting to try to maneuver that every single day. So, wherever you are listening from today, whether you're in your car going to work, maybe you're at work, maybe you're on a lunch break, maybe it's a walk, maybe you're exercising, or maybe even sitting at home, I want you to know this conversation isn't about judgment. The Merc method and the Merc Nation isn't about judgment. I want you to be who you are and don't wear the mask. I want it to be about awareness. Because once you become aware of something, you gain the power to respond differently. Sometimes that small shift changes everything. So let's start simple, right? What's a trigger? In simplest terms, a trigger is anything that causes an emotional reaction that feels bigger than the moment itself. I'll say it again. A trigger is anything that causes an emotional reaction that feels bigger than the moment itself. A trigger is often a reaction that's larger than the current situation. I'll give you an example, okay? Imagine someone doesn't text you back. Most people might think they're busy, but another person might instantly feel rejected. I've sent so many text messages where I feel the person was going to text me right away, and I just sit there and stare at my phone. And then nothing happens. And then I overthink it and go, they don't want to talk to me. We're not friends anymore. I don't know what's going on, right? You might feel abandoned. You might feel anxiousness from that. You might start creating stories in your head about what you did wrong. The trigger isn't really about the text message. The trigger is the emotional wound the situation touched, right? It's important to understand because many of us spend years trying to remove every trigger from our life. We avoid difficult conversations or certain people or memories. We don't want to talk about things that make us uncomfortable. But eventually, life presents those situations anyways. The goal isn't eliminating every trigger that we have, the goal is to understand them. Think about a smoke detector, okay? When the alarm goes off, the first thing you do isn't destroy the detector. You ask what caused it to sound. You start looking around. Maybe you're starting to smell the air. Triggers work the same way. They're emotional alarms. Sometimes they're warning us about something important. Sometimes they're reminding us of pain that still needs healing. Sometimes they're showing us patterns we didn't know existed. Just like the water for me. It took me so long to understand where the trigger was really coming from and why. It was not so much about the water, but the fact that I thought it was my fault that he had passed and drowned. And here's something that changed my perspective. Being triggered doesn't mean you're weak. Being triggered doesn't mean you failed. Being triggered means you're human. Every person listening today has some kind of emotional scars. Some are visible, some are invisible, but they're there. The question isn't whether you have triggers. The question is whether you know how to listen to them. Think about your own life. When do you feel yourself getting defensive? When do you shut down? When do you become anxious? When do you become angry faster than normal? When do you suddenly lose confidence? Those moments might be pointing towards something deeper, and that's not something to fear, that's something to explore because awareness is where healing begins. I tell everyone awareness is so important. It's basically half the battle, trying to understand where things are coming from. You can't heal what you refuse to acknowledge, and you can't understand what you constantly avoid. Today, I want us to become curious instead of critical. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me, maybe ask, what is this feeling trying to show me? What's the alarm going off? That one question has the power to change everything. One of the biggest challenges with triggers is that most of us don't recognize them when they're happening. We only realize it afterwards, right? We look back and think, why did I react that way? Why did that bother me so much? The truth is that triggers usually leave clues before they fully take over. Your heart starts racing, right? Your stomach feels tight, kind of feels sick to your stomach. Your patience suddenly disappears. Maybe you start to want to escape the situation altogether. The body often knows before the mind catches up. Think about the last time something upset you. If you replay that moment, chances are there were warning signs. Your breathing changed, your thoughts sped up, your emotion intensified. Maybe you started to sweat. You wanted to get out of the situation and fast. That's why awareness matters. Pay attention to your patterns. What situations repeatedly frustrate you? What conversations leave you exhausted? Those aren't random occurrences, those are clues. And every clue gives you an opportunity to understand yourself a little bit better. You don't know what you don't know. But being aware starts that process. Observation creates that awareness. Awareness creates choice. And then that choice creates growth. Talked with a lot of people about triggers in my life. I've had a lot of triggers in my life, to be honest. Many people think triggers are purely emotional. I did. But triggers often show up physically first. Your body remembers experiences in ways your mind sometimes forgets. I'll give you an example. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt uncomfortable and really didn't know why? At least not at first. Have you ever heard a voice, smelled a scent, or went to a place that suddenly changed your mood? That's because your body stores memories and associations. Sometimes a trigger can feel like tension in your shoulders, right? I know some of my listeners understand that. You just tighten up, right? And it starts to go up your neck. You start to get a headache. You get tired. You have problems concentrating. That was always a big one for me. Kind of still is. I still have triggers. Sometimes it's an overwhelming urge to leave the room or the situation. Our body is constantly communicating with us. The problem is we don't listen. We're taught to push through, keep going, stay busy. But healing often begins when we slow down and listen. Next time you feel emotionally overwhelmed, ask yourself, what is my body trying to tell me? Am I holding tension? Am I feeling safe? Those simple questions can reconnect you with the present moment before emotions take complete control. It's that awareness. So let's talk about something that might be a little uncomfortable, and I just want to keep it real. So I apologize in advance, but let's talk about the people closest to us: family, friends, coworkers, partners. The reason is simple. People closest to us often touch our deepest emotional wounds. Sometimes criticism may remind us of years of feeling not good enough. Someone's silence may remind us of abandonment that we used to have. Someone we know closest to us, their anger may remind us of a painful experience we thought we moved past. But this doesn't mean those people are always wrong. It also doesn't mean you're always wrong. It simply means that relationships often reveal areas that still need healing, and that's okay. Sometimes the strongest emotional reactions aren't about the present, they're about the past showing up in the present. Understanding that can change the way we communicate. Instead of immediately attacking or defending, we just pause and ask, what exactly am I reacting to? The current situation or something that situation reminds me of in the past? That question alone can prevent countless arguments and misunderstandings with the people that surround you every single day. Not every painful experience is a trigger, though. Sometimes something hurts because it's genuinely hurtful. There's a difference. If someone lies to you, that's painful. If someone treats you poorly, that's painful. A trigger happens when the emotional response connects to something deeper than the current event, the current situation happening right now. Imagine a small scratch on your skin. It stings at first, right? Now imagine touching an old wound that's never fully healed. The reaction is much stronger. Triggers often reveal emotional wounds that haven't fully healed. Again, it isn't about blame, it's about understanding. When we understand the difference, we become less reactive and more intentional. What can we actually do when we're triggered? I usually say start small, like baby steps. Take a breath. Not because breathing magically fixes everything, but because it interrupts the automatic reaction. Go take a walk. You drink some water. Step outside. Get grounded. Write down what you're feeling. Call someone you trust. Maybe say it out loud. I'm feeling triggered right now. Naming the experience can reduce its intensity. I always tell everyone, and you don't have to do it, but it does help. Maybe journal it. Write it down. What happened? How did you feel? What thoughts appeared? The reason I tell people to journal is because you can go back and see your growth. Everyone likes visuals. Maybe try it out. Over time, you'll start noticing those patterns. And once patterns become visible, they become manageable. Small steps repeated constantly create big changes. We are just trying to work through triggers instead of avoiding them. I know avoidance feels good temporarily, Healing feels better long term. Many of us spend years trying to avoid situations that, make us uncomfortable and trigger us. We avoid those emotions, we avoid those memories, but avoidance just strengthens the triggers. They don't go anywhere. Every time we run from something, our brain learns to fear it. Healing happens when we gradually sit with it and face the emotions with support and patience and self compassion. That doesn't mean you're forcing yourself into overwhelming situations. It just means taking manageable baby steps. One little conversation, one reflection, just one true, honest moment at a time. Remember, growth isn't a giant leap. It's not a race, it's a process. It's usually a series of small decisions. We have to learn to show ourselves some grace. One of the hardest lessons in healing is learning how to be kind to yourself. The core of the Merck method. Be kind to your mind. Many people become angry at themselves for being triggered. They think they should be stronger by now. Please stop. You feel like you should be further along by now or more healed. But remember, healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel strong. Some days old feelings will resurface. That doesn't mean you're moving backwards. It means you're human. You're falling, but falling forward, that's still progress. Think about speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to a friend, a really close friend. You wouldn't tell your friend they're weak for struggling, right? I would never do that. You'd encourage them, you'd support them, you'd remind them they're making progress. Offer yourself that same kindness. It starts with you. Healing grows in environments of compassion, not criticism. Here are a few real life examples I came up with, some scenarios that you can kind of work through. Someone criticizes you at work. The old response might be defensiveness. A healthier response might be, why is this affecting me so deeply? Think about it. A friend cancels plans. An old response might be assuming they don't care. Your new, healthier response might be, what story am I creating in my head right now? Another one, someone disagrees with you. That's going to happen constantly. The old response might be anger. The new, healthier response might be curiosity. Healthy responses don't eliminate the emotions. They create space between the emotion and the reaction. And in that space, your growth happens. Remember, we live in a culture that loves quick fixes, but emotional healing doesn't happen overnight. It's built one baby step at a time, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one true moment of awareness at a time. Remember, the goal isn't to become someone who never gets triggered. The goal is to become someone who understands the triggers, someone who recognizes them, who responds rather than reacts. Becoming someone who keeps moving forward despite them. Keep moving forward. Every day you become more aware is a day you're growing. Even if progress feels slow, that's okay. Again, it's not a race. Just keep going. Small steps still move you forward. So as I start to close up the conversation, I want to leave you with one final thought, okay? Your triggers are not proof that you're broken. No one is broken. You're proof that you lived. They tell a story about experiences you've had, challenges you've faced, and wounds you've carried. The goal here isn't to shame yourself for having them. The goal is to understand them. Because when you understand them, you begin taking away their power. You start to heal. You stop being controlled by every emotional reaction. Remember, growth doesn't happen because we avoid the difficult feelings. That growth happens because we're willing to face them with courage. So this week, pay attention. Notice your reactions. Notice your emotions. Notice the patterns. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. And if you discover something about yourself, don't run from it. Learn from it. because every trigger has something to teach us, and every lesson learned becomes another step toward becoming the person you're meant to be. You have a purpose. I greatly appreciate every single one of you listening as always. And like every single episode, I leave you with this: stay grounded, stay kind to yourself, and remember, strength begins with honesty. Until next time.